All right, we're taking a look here at d.n.g.n, d.n.g.n. This is a print and play game that you can pick up at PNP Arcade. I'll put the link down below. I printed it, I made it. It's not pretty, unfortunately. I don't know whether it was the file size that I did, but like the things printed slightly smaller than card size, and it's not the greatest, although I'm pretty proud of how I did these little double-sided chits here. It can be done much nicer. However, it's a fun campaign game that offers a lot for your few bucks to pick it up and spend some time putting it together. So in this video, I just want to go over a little bit about what it is and what it has to offer, and get a sense of whether you might like it, if based on what I can show you here. So what is this game? Well, despite its name, d.n.g.n, suggesting a dungeon, it is actually not a dungeon crawl per se. It is a campaign game where a lot of what you're doing is overland, and you are using these tiles. There are, I think, 8 or 9 of them that come in the game, and you're going to randomize them. And the symbols on them are going to represent different enemies and such, depending on the particular scenario you are in. So in the case of the scenario that I'm in right here, the circles represent these cultists, and the archers are represented by squares, and the guards are represented by triangles. And so as you move through the spaces, you will encounter different aspects of these, and you may also encounter traps and some other things in the environment. And all of this is told to you by the scenario card, which we will take a look at in a moment. The AI is a 8 or 9 card driven AI with these little behavior cards. So as you go through each turn, you will be pulling in a new card and then reading the line associated with that card. So the archer in this particular case, if this was the behavior card, would have no movement, it would have no shield value, it would have a range of 5, it would do 2 attacks, and they could pierce your armor if this was the symbol pulled in. In a different case, if, for example, this was the symbol pulled in, the archer would have 3 movement, still no shield value, it would have a range of 4, and it would do an attack of 2, and it would have no special ability. So the behavior of the enemy will change based on this very simple to manage, easy to manage system. And when you get through this deck, you just shuffle it, and then at the appropriate point in the sequence of play, you pull in the new cards for each enemy, and then you can see what they will do that turn. So you don't actually know what they're going to be doing until you get to that part of the sequence of play. Well, what are you doing? What you're doing is trying to meet the objectives of a particular scenario card, and we will take a look here at one. I didn't actually print out the cards. I'll try to just show you one. I'm actually on the 4th one right now, but I don't want to give too much away. So we can see the campaign starts on the cold hillside with icy winds blowing through the trees. There is a rune that is intended to take you somewhere, and it hasn't. There's the slight glimmer at the base of a hill. Is that fires from a village? You're going to set off seeking a path through the dense woods. The size of this, what this refers to, are these dungeon cards, and the objective cards have a triangle, or rather a star on them. There's no objective card there. Here we go. There's 2 different objective cards. You randomize them at the outset, and this means that you take one of the objective cards, and then you take 2 other random cards on top of it, and shuffle those 3 together so you don't know where the objective is going to be. And then you add 2 other random non-objective card tiles on top of it, and that then becomes the stack of dungeon tiles that you will be turning over and playing through in this part of the campaign. Your goal is to reach the star, to reach the objective tile. There is a timing mechanism here. So you have a timer here on this card, and at the outset, you put your timer on whatever it tells you to do. And each round, you're ticking down. And once you start to run out of time, there is a consequence to you in the context of what you're able to do. And we'll talk about that in a bit. And then each of these cards has the key that I mentioned. So in this particular scenario, the circle is going to represent a trap, and the square is going to represent a different type of trap. In this case, they're both trap 1 values. The triangle will be a wolf, and this shape will be a bear. And then you have the scenario, or the objective star here, which doesn't have a particular value. It's just the village that you're supposed to reach. Whereas you can see over here that star represents a warrior. So it is a particular enemy there. And that is what you do. So you play through the scenario, and when you run out of time, you then you flip over this card, which I'm not going to show you, and there are 2 outcomes on the back of every one of these 9 cards. A success outcome and a failure outcome. So it's kind of like a branching story. If you succeed, you do one thing, and if you fail, you do another. And it is all set up based on that card. There's a reference here that's pretty useful and important, because everything in the game is based on iconography, and you need to understand the iconography in order to play the game. So, for example, this is an item I have, this mall, and I actually purchased it for 10 money. It has a range of 1. It's a one-handed item, and the key of what it does is down here. So this means it does 1 attack. This means it does, or could do, a piercing value. It could reduce the defense of a target by 1. And this means it could push a target back by 2 pushes to an empty hex. And the reason that could be particularly useful is, for example, we saw that there are some traps in certain areas. You could push somebody into a trap if you wanted to. The symbols above are really the heart of the game. This game functions with action points. They're called stamina cubes, as well as mana, which in this case is represented by the red, and something called focus, which I've chosen to represent with the green. Now, these cubes do not come with you're getting just the print and play file. I just assigned these values. You could use really whatever you want. And at the outset, you have a certain number of stamina and a certain number of mana, which is used for magic, and focus, which is used to give extra benefit. You have these in this icon, means they are ready to be used and deployed. This asterisk is movement. So for example, if I wanted to move my character during my action phase 2 hexes, wherever they are, I wanted to move them 2 hexes here, say 1, 2, 1, 2, I could do so in this way by assigning these stamina cubes here. At the end of that action, they would go right back into this pool and be ready for the next round. However, if I wanted to assign this to get a 3rd movement and a push of an enemy, I would need to do so by putting something in what looks like this. This means it exhausts when it's done, and it goes to the exhausted area, and it is not ready the next turn. You have to wait to ready it. You need to place these cubes left to right on the card. So I can't actually just choose this as an action. I can't say like, oh, I'm right next to an enemy, I want to push the enemy into a trap, and just do this. You need to complete the icons or the spots on each card from left to right if you're going to have access to the additional values. So for example, this is a sword, and I can use it to attack 1 and have something automatically readied. I can use it here. what this symbol means is it is a frenzy attack. So it will attack whatever I am attacking plus whatever is adjacent to it. And this is, as you would suggest, as it looks like a shield value. So this is going to give me a 1 shield value to absorb a point of damage when I get attacked in that round. However, to use this, I will then, when I'm done, have to place this in the exhausted area. It's not immediately going to be available to me. So when at the end of my actions, I will be losing the ability for the next round immediately to use stamina cubes based on the things that are placed in the exhaustion. There is also this symbol, which is a magic symbol. Let's see, don't actually have anything here that requires magic, but if there is something that looks like this, it means it can only be activated by magic, and that is a mana cube. So you have restrictions on that. And then you also have things that will allow you to ready your mana cubes. So all the mana cubes start here in the magic circle, but this icon right here is called charge. And so it allows you to move a mana cube from the mana pool to your action pool. So it will be ready the next round. So for example, you need to plan ahead in this particular case, but if I wanted to do that charge, I would need to use one of my stamina cubes to give myself this shield, because again, I have to fill left to right. So if this were my turn, for example, what I would be doing, let's say this was my turn. What I would be doing would be I would be able to move twice. I would be able to attack twice. I would get a shield to ward off an attack. And I would be able to take one of this mana cube that is here and move it to here and have it ready for the next turn. So the management of these things is very key to the mechanics of the game and the planning involved. These little items or loots that I picked up are one-time use only things. So for example, if I wanted to use this broken bottle to do 2 attacks and force a character to be bleeding, which would be causing them to lose a health every new round, every new turn, I could do that, but I'm doing it, and not only am I exhausting this stamina cube when I'm done, placing it in the exhausted area, but I am getting rid of this loot. It's a one-time use only thing. You pick up loot along the way, and you can pick up loot when you have cleared an area of all enemies, and then you can just forage for loot basically and get something. And as mentioned, there is equipment that is different than loot. This is equipment that can be purchased, and they all offer various options of not only what they do, but the way in which they do it. So whether they are doing something with a stamina cube that can be immediately available or is going to become exhausted. And you can see some of them. I'm trying to find something that requires magic. So for example, this grimoire makes sense. Everything, in order to activate any of this, it is going to be through magic. And these numbers here in the magic circle refer to the ability of other players that are nearby to also get the benefit of this. Now, I'm playing this solo, but you can play this with up to 1 other character, sort of cooperatively. And it is what's the word? If you do that, it's kind of linear in terms of what you're doing about the enemy's strength. So for example, if you're playing with 1 other character, you just double the health of the enemy to 12. And the strategy and the tactics of that do come into play when you have things like this that will allow for benefits to your companion. This is going to restore health in terms of an area that is, an amount away from you. In terms of like how tactical is this, there definitely are aspects to it that are tactical, because you do have movement that your enemies will be doing. So for example, let's take an example here. For example, say you're standing here. This thing is going to take the shortest path toward you to movement, but it may only have a limited range. So you do have some possibility of making decisions on your turn, whether you want to try to attack, move and attack it, or just try to move, maybe say out of its range. But because of this behavior functionality, you're not necessarily going to know next turn what the range is going to be. So you have to be a little bit adventurous in some sense, because it does you can't predict completely what it is going to do. And as mentioned, in some cases, say for example, this is a trap, and you had a card where you could move and then push and push. Perhaps you could push this into a trap for damage. So there's some choices along those lines. You are, generally speaking, needing to move through the card to get to the next card. And some cards like this one have a clear way to do it because there's only an entrance and an exit, but other cards have more than that. And so you need to make choices about which way you're going to go. And then you don't know, if you go up this way, you don't know that the pile of unknown cards, whether or not that is going to have the objective card in that pile as it is right here or not. So you could be going in the wrong direction. And all along the way, the time is ticking down. So there is time pressure. You're not really spending leisurely time exploring things. You are on a mission to actually do something. So there's a bit more to the game than I have told you here, but this is the general overview of it. It is a campaign, and you start with the one card that I showed you, and you will be able to level up along the way, and leveling up will allow you to make choices about getting more stamina cubes or turning over. These are the kind of action cards. So for example, you can see here, this is 1 and this says 2. At a certain point, I had chosen to level this up by turning this over. I could have an option to level this up and turn it over, and you get a better benefit from the bottom of the card if you do that. And you have these 3, so you're also making decisions about what you are going to do in terms of leveling up. You will be getting some gold along the way and having the opportunity to purchase things, various equipment, and making those decisions about what the equipment that you're purchasing is, or whether you're going to save up to get something that's perhaps better than something you could buy for a lesser amount of gold. So there's quite a bit here in terms of a traditional sort of dungeon style dungeon crawl. It is a dungeon crawl, really, but it is described in many cases as being outside. And I'll show you, there's a pretty fair variety of enemies. I'm not going to go through and show you everything. I mean, you do know what they are at the outset when you're setting up your particular part of the story, because you need to you need to take them out and reference them, because they are decided upon for you based on the symbols that you get and the story that you get for your that particular part of the campaign. So it's not particularly a mystery there, but you can see there's some nice art and variety of. This has 12 health, for example, whereas this dire wolf here had 6, and then a lot of these special abilities come into play to differentiate the character. So it comes with a sheet that you can print out as the play reference, and it has the icons for what they mean if they come up on something that you have, the adventure icons, and what the monster special behaviors are that go with them. So they can, as I said, pierce through protection. They can summon other things. They can staunch their own bleeding. They can go into a frenzy just as you can go into a frenzy, and things of that nature. So that is where the variety comes in. And then finally, a little backwards, we'll look at the sequence of play here. At the outset, you determine if you're bleeding, and that is something you would be doing if you had received a bleed token. And if so, you lose a health. Then you are assigning your cubes, those cubes that we looked at from the action pool. as I said, left to right on each card, and you're making your decision about, you're planning what you're going to do. But then you're dealing the behavior cards onto the monster cards. So you're making your decisions before you know exactly what the monsters are going to do. You could know what they're capable of doing because you can look and see potentially what they can do, but you don't know what they're actually going to do that turn. So you sort of take your best guess, and then you deal your behavior cards, and then what you're doing is taking those actions. And after you take the actions, the ones that are exhausted go into the exhausted pool, and then the mana and the focus go back to the mana pool. And then the monsters activate, and they activate lowest to highest, and that refers to these numbers here. So when a monster comes out, you put this onto the map portion, and then you put the other matching token onto the HP tracker portion. So as the monster's health goes down, hopefully, you move this down until the monster is dismissed. So the monsters will act, and we already looked at what they can possibly do. We can see whether they move, whether they have a defense, what their range is, what their attack is, and any other special abilities. And it's pretty clear based on the behavior card. You'll be following along. So the monsters will take their action, and if you are wounded, you will take your wounds, and then you will continue on. If you're in a doorway, meaning the edge of a card here, you may open it and explore it by drawing another card. That is the exploration phase. Otherwise, if you are on a dungeon card and nobody is there, the monsters have been dismissed, you get to flip over a loot card. And in theory, it's the loot card that you put next to this when you originally set it up, but I just left them in my pile. And then you get whatever loot that is. And there's a whole stack of cool loot here. Some of it is something like this, some gold. There are occasionally some bad things in here, like a trap, but something could be really good, like a scroll of focus. Focus is super important because a focus cube will allow you to do whatever the action is, but double it. And they are rare to get, and they come into play with certain loot, and I think maybe certain equipment, because they need to have a special icon in order to be brought into play and moved, and that is very rare. So in any case, when you've cleared the area, you can get the loot, and then the last thing you do is you reduce. Sorry about that. So at the end there, the timer phase, you reduce the timer by 1. If 0, you reset to the mission timer value, and your adventurers each lose 1 stamina cube. So that is the impact of running out of time. You can continue on with your mission, but you lose a cube, and it is that's a significant detriment because the cubes are going to sort of atrophy as you go anyway, and you put them into usages that are exhausted, and then you need to wait for them to become readied again. So there is incentive to get through as best you can before the time runs out, before you lose your cube. So that's a basic look here at this game, and there was mention somewhere of like the idea that there would be expansions to it, expansion packs with new cards and things, which I think would be great. So as I said, there is it is a campaign. It's a kind of one and done playthrough basically, but there are quite a few enemies, as we saw, that you will be encountering, and the little story that you get, the different items and loot that you can pick up gives a sense of accomplishment and challenge and growth throughout the game, as well as leveling up your skills and the baseline skills that you can do, and gaining more stamina cubes. There's a maximum number in the game, which I believe is 10, and it is it's enjoyable. There's it's a lot in the file that you get. It takes a little bit to build. As I said, I didn't do the greatest job. I didn't even bother to put card backs on these because they're just being pulled out and and placed as part of the individual mission setup, so I didn't really think I needed that. I did do the card backs for the loot because those are in a stack and then they get revealed along the way. So there's a nice throwing blade, for example, with a distance value of 3, and it does up to 3 attacks, but again, one-time use only. So that is that's a look into this game, d.n.g.n. I've been having some fun with it and plan to finish off the campaign, and would certainly pick up expansions if they came out. It is the core of it is this action point management system and the choices and decisions that you're making, while you have some general sense of the situation because you know where you are and where your goal is and what is here, but you don't know the behavior of what is going to be here specifically until after you have made your decisions about what you're going to do.